Hello and welcome to this edition of A Conversation With. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network, and we're into June. Andy Pollock is back, our guest. Thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
The president of the SouthCoast LGBTQ+ organization here in the region. It's great to see you again. Thanks
Nice
for coming
to be
in.
here. Thank you for having me.
Lots going on. I know with Pride Month, always lots of activities going on. So I want to start with that. Let's start off. I mean, there's lots of things we can get to, but we want to get this out for what events are taking place this month, and there's lots happening too.
It's crazy, yeah. Tonight we have our first event, which is a Pride kickoff at Round the Bend Farm. It's a wonderful soiree, kind of dinner, entertainment, music. June 3rd, 11 to 4, will be at Buttonwood Park. That's a Pride Festival, so it's great for all ages. It's very much a kid-friendly event. And then the next weekend on June 10th will be Pride in Taunton, which is huge. It was our first event last year and really successful. Again, 11 to 4 at Hopewell Park in Taunton.
A lot of things, and you and I think talked about this last year before, but I'm thinking with the pandemic, like other organizations and stuff like that, the pandemic limited you in what you could do.
Right.
Are you finding things are back to, I don't want to say normal, that's not the right word, but do you find you're getting more events and are able to do more?
Yeah, it seems like people are really responding, coming out and participating, which is great. And last year was our first after the pandemic festival. It was really successful. I think we had about 1,500 people. There was 100 vendors in New Bedford, about the same in Taunton, maybe a little bit more. And just people thrilled to be out and about.
Did you have to sort of start from scratch again? Because you were doing this obviously before the pandemic, and then like everything else, it just stopped.
Right, yeah. There's some historical memory that we have. So some people that have been doing this for a while and they're still on board. We've got some new folks. Taunton was a completely new event. They had never had a Taunton Pride. So that was from scratch. But it went off wonderfully, so we're excited to have it this year.
How important are those events? These are really public events for you guys, and they're out in places that everybody knows. How important are they for you guys?
I think they're critical. You know the history of why it's in June, right? Stonewall event was
in New York.
In New York in 1969, I want to say 68, 69. And it was the first time that gays fought back. Before that time, police would raid the bars, drag you out, arrest you, put your names in the paper, everyone against the wall. And we have folks that remember those days. Providence was known to be pretty violent. Boston less so, New Bedford not as much. And to celebrate the fact that we can be open, that we can be out, that we can be proud, that we can be visible is really important for our community, considering the history that we're in. And even today, I think it's even more important with the violence that's happened against us, legislation that's being put forward. I think there's 471 state legislative movements to limit the rights of LGBT folks in the United States. And even locally, we've had instances of people who are interested in banning books or at least curtailing access to LGBT materials.
Which is, and we'll get to that too in a second. I want to ask about, so these events, a cross-section of folks age-wise, right? And I think that's important too, because but you've talked about, I know you talked last year and you and I were talking off camera this year. I mean, there's a wide range of folks that are dealing with, in a sense, different issues. Even though it's the same issue, there are different levels of, levels might not be the right word, there are different stages, I guess, of their issues.
Yes. We have, what I tell people when they sign up for Pride, I say, make sure you have a kid-friendly booth. I belong to the Quaker meetings. We have 4 meetings that are there. They do face painting, there's coloring, there's dog bowls. It's and it's very popular. But we also have a tent or a series of tents for our elders. So there's food, there's chairs, there's games, there's more accessibility. So the 2 different spectrums, and it's an interesting planning process because you want to plan for everyone in the group, from someone who's 12 or 13 who's just trying to figure out where they're at, to someone who's 83, 84, who's wants to come and participate but might not have the mobility or the stamina to walk around for 5 hours around Buttonwood Park. So the idea is that we'll meet the needs of our community as a whole. And that's what we've been doing programmatically, and I'm really thrilled with the vision of the SouthCoast LGBT Network.
You're very involved with, obviously, with the whole program, but you seem to have a passion, as you and I have talked. You're really passionate about the young folks and their dealing, and those that are elderly. As I said, you care about everybody. But you seem to have those. Seem to be really near and dear to your heart. The folks that are trying to find themselves, and the folks that are seniors.
Right. We have 3 focuses that we've identified as most vulnerable in our population. We're a marginalized, vulnerable population as it is, but youth, trans folks, and elders. And we have programs for all 3. But I do feel that for the youth, a lot of these kids come from homes where they're not accepted, they're questioned, they don't feel safe. There's bullying, the national suicide rate, even the state suicide rate. If you look at the state statistics on LGBT youth, the amount of bullying that goes on is tremendously high compared to the straight students. Suicide ideation, suicide attempts, suicide success is, again, markedly higher. Homelessness, skipping school, dropping out of school, all these issues. So addressing those are incredibly important. And we have a program called Elevate Youth. We have about 100 kids that have gone through the program. And I'm so excited about this because when they come in, 37% of these kids have primary care doctors. When they're in program and as they leave, 100% of them have primary care doctors. The kids come in, 100% of them are home secure, which again, for our population, is a huge number. To have 100% not homeless or couch serving or selling themselves for sex or a place for them to stay. It's amazing. So, those are some of the metrics that we've been tracking and following, and it warms my heart. On the other side, you have elders who have been through a lot. They've been through, let's look at some of the markers. It was, when they were growing up, it was a mental illness. Homosexuality was in the DSM, the diagnostic codes for a mental illness. Gender identity was just removed in 2013 as a mental illness, gender dysmorphia. Now it's changed. I don't think they call it that anymore. Being raided at bars, being thrown out of your job, being thrown out of your housing. And even today, in many states across the country, you can be fired because you're gay, you can lose your house or what have you. But these folks really lived through those things. Never mind HIV, which hit in 1981, and there wasn't effective treatment until 1996. You think about 700,000 people dying and what that did to the community with a government that did nothing. And most of the religious folks being jubilant that we got what we deserved. I remember those days.
Yeah.
They were scary, they were amazingly difficult. So you have people who have lived through, don't ask, don't tell. My husband was the first in the country to have to leave the military to get married because 11,000 folks, even under Clinton's don't ask, don't tell, were, if you had someone who had a grudge and they knew you were gay, they could report you.
Yeah.
And you would lose your pension, you would lose your insurance, you would get a dishonorable discharge with homosexual stamped on it. And I can introduce you to people who've had that happen. So, if you look at the context of history and you can see where these folks are like, oh my God, now I'm going to go into a congregate housing situation like a nursing home or assisted living. Am I going to be safe? And I've done a pitch and talked about LGBT elders to a group of folks that work in congregate housing. It was interesting because I did the whole thing about accepting, being safe, giving clues and signs that you're accepting and welcoming person. And one of the women said to me at the end that she had been halfway through the presentation, she thought I was talking about the staff and didn't even realize that I was talking about the residents, that they could be sexual or they could be, they could be trans or they could be whatever. And well, at least we have a convert, you know. So the elders, they tend to be more isolative. They tend to be not tech savvy. They tend to have a close-knit group of friends that's diminishing over time. And we want them to live out, and they're fearful. They're fearful of, are they going to be treated well? Are they going to be rejected? And a lot of them go back into the closet or they retreat. So what we've been doing is working with them with caseworkers and doing tons of social events, intergenerational and just for elders as well. So, and that in American culture, but especially gay culture, that's very countercultural. You know, if you look at The Advocate or some of the other gay publications, it's all, you know, 20-year-olds with their shirts off. It's not the elder.
Yeah,
working.
nobody wants to see their shirts off.
Right.
It's just not going to happen.
Right, but they don't see them working in their garden or, you know, having lunch or doing normal things that people do. And I think, you know, the youth culture and the value of youth is throughout American society,
right,
but strongly in the LGBT. So we're working against that, getting stories from people, getting them to tell their stories, telling them to tell their history, getting them to talk with the younger folks so that they get the wisdom of the elders passed down to them.
I was going to say the interesting thing too is not only are you dealing with that, but you're just dealing with the fact that they're getting older, and and the issues that come with getting older.
And they may not have children. They may be having issues with their family. They might have been, you know, shunned by their family. They might not have people that are there to protect them or to monitor or to do whatever, and that's what we're there for, is to make sure that they are safe, that they are joyful, that they're living the fullest life that they can. So that makes me just absolutely happy that after a life of really horrible things, that they can be in a place where they're valued, they're taken care of, they're loved, they're accepted, and their wisdom is being shared to our community.
I've asked this to other people, and I was kind of touching on this too. Do you find that the younger folks that you deal with, and again, youth rules, it always has, do you find that they listen to the older folks with their wisdom? Or is it because, I mean, listen, I mean, it's just like being a kid with your parent anyway. It's like, oh, he's, you know, mom and dad are old, I'm not going to listen to them. But do you find that their stories and their lessons do resonate with the younger generation?
I think so. I do, just because there's been so many things that have happened. And showing my age, I mean, I worked for marriage equality in 2004. There's kids coming up now that are in their 19 or so. They've never known a place in Massachusetts where marriage wasn't legal. Oh. So, explaining that to them, or the Puzzles attack in 2006. Yeah. That someone would go into a bar trying to commit murder in New Bedford. The light goes on, and I think these stories are compelling and interesting for them. So, yeah, I do find they're interested.
Which is interesting because, as I was saying, and you kind of talked to too, I mean, youth doesn't always listen to the elders either. It's just one of those things. I don't care who you are. It's just, oh yeah, these guys. And I notice with my kids now, it's like, all right, they ask for your opinion now on things as they get older.
But like, my dad was in the military in World War II. You probably had a grandfather that was in World War II, and you want to hear those stories, right? You want to.
And they, the ironic thing, he never talked about it.
Right. Well, a lot of them didn't.
No.
But we want to do historical context. We want to get that information because gay people, I always say, are like giraffes born in a dairy barn. They are. They really are. It's. You come from, I come from a Scots-Irish family that's been here for a long time. There's traditions and history and stories that are passed down. When you're a gay kid, you realize you're gay in a straight family. So, that oral tradition, the culture, and all the rest of it are learned by your peers and from a larger context rather than your family, per se. Because a lot of times the family doesn't know what to do with you. I know for my family, they didn't have words for it. I mean, it wasn't part of their lexicon at all.
Yeah. Before I want to make sure I ask, because we were talking last year at this time about the community center.
Yes.
Which I know you're still going through, but why don't you just update folks on where that stands? Because last year you were talking about, it really does sound like a huge place for not just New Bedford, but for the region itself, for Southeastern Mass.
Wildly excited. So the outside of the building is done. They've done work on that. They're removing the roof. They're doing demolition on the inside. They've done remediation on asbestos. We've been very fortunate raising money. We have about $1.6 million that we've raised to date. We have another 1.4 or so that's outstanding with different grants and appeals and some earmarks from the state. So we're very sanguine about the financials. We're still doing fundraising. We're still working quietly with corporations and high worth individuals to donate. We're going to start doing the public phase where we sell bricks and I always threaten to put a thermometer on the building and I always get shot down. They don't like the idea. The board doesn't like the idea. But
those are people always look at them,
they
though.
Love it. They love it. But hey, I'm only one person. And we work with consensus. I'm a Quaker. We work with consensus. So,
that's funny.
but anyway, so that will come a little bit later. We're hoping that we'll be in the building within a year.
Okay. This is the old Sister Rose house for folks who don't know,
Right.
in
The
downtown
old-
New Bedford.
The old on 68th Street. So
Right.
the new windows are in. It looks phenomenal. I think the building's going to be great. What I'm excited about is that neighborhood. You have Gallery X down the street.
Yep.
You have the Unitarian Church right across the street. You have south of us. There's a pottery studio. I could see it being an arts area for the city.
And for folks who don't remember when you were here last year, there's a lot of things that are going into that community center. Why don't you just touch on that, what your vision is?
Yes, we have art space. We have a community kitchen, which we'll be renting out. We hope to rent it at a lower rate, and it's accessible through bus lines in downtown New Bedford, which a commercial kitchen is used for folks who are producing food for farmers markets or catering. They need to have a commercial kitchen license. And so using that at night, we can generate some income, but also provide an enterprise incubator for businesses in the Bedford area. Also with a commercial kitchen, we can have dinners, lunches, breakfasts, things like that.
It's a big building, by the way. I mean, you may not see it just looking at the front of it, but it's a good-sized building.
You know, I look at it and I think we're growing so quickly that we probably will grow out of it in a few years. I'm sure we'll keep the building and for forever, but it's looking smaller and smaller as the network grows. But there'll be space for rental. We have a trans therapist who wants to rent some office space, which would be phenomenal. So we can, if someone presents with some issues, let's just say third floor, there's someone who will see you and take care of you. We'll have a studio space. We did live stream for about 100 shows on cable. No, it was actually on Facebook and some other medium. That was very successful. So we'll have a little studio there and meeting spaces for dinners, hangout, yoga, whatever. There's also going to be a tech area where people can look.
It's huge.
Who don't have computers or don't have access or don't feel safe.
I don't know how to use them either.
Or don't know how to use them. Guilty, I mean, I
was thinking for the elderly folks. First of all, get them out of the house of where they are, and then, but as you said, they don't even know how to use it. That's a perfect, safe place that they can learn to do that stuff.
Next to the 18-year-old who's never known anything except computers. I mean, I don't know about you, but I learned how to type on a manual typewriter.
I did, yes.
I feel like a dinosaur, ping, slap,
yep.
type. But Comcast has been very generous with that, and we'll have access to computers and tech support. So it's going to be a multi-generational, multifaceted facility, and it's the only one of its kind in the state. There's nothing like this in Massachusetts. I think the closest one is in Connecticut.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. The more serious topics that you and I were talking about, just to touch on, I know that as you were saying, there's so much legislation, over 400 pieces that are across the country right now that are that deal with some sort of restrictions to the LGBTQ community. It's got to be frustrating from your standpoint, the organization, just in general, that any progress you make is one step forward, two steps back in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I would agree. We fought for marriage equality in 2003 to 2007, and sort of felt the battle was won when it was done, and now we realize that it's not.
Well, the Supreme Court is somehow underlined in some discussions. I know a couple of justices maybe take it up again.
Yes, Clarence Thomas has said that it was one of the mistakes of made. I don't know how that would happen. I mean, it's going to be 20 years in November that the court in Massachusetts allowed same-sex marriage, and then they gave 6 months for it to be implemented. So it would be May 17th of 2024 will be 20 years. And it's interesting when you look at the back then the editorials. They usually it was paper more then, but there'd be an article in the paper or an editorial pro, and there'd be something against. And the against was, you look at it now and you think, oh my God, what were they thinking? Crime was going to increase, nuclear family was going to disintegrate, you were going to leave your wife and have a gay marriage. We called it the V8 factor. I could have had a gay marriage, you know? Like, it just, you know, the whole society was going to fall apart, where actually I find that there's much more stability in the gay community, there's more stability, and people are more in the suburbs, people, you know, and God knows the wedding industry has been thrilled.
Well, in some ways, yes, and in some ways, I mean, you do have those businesses that are saying, for religious beliefs, I'm not going to handle that.
There's a law introduced in Texas saying that, you know, you can refuse service to people because of your religious beliefs. So if you are a doctor and you see a gay person, you can say no, which is unbelievable. I think it's incredibly un-American that you could do that, but.
Well, especially for a doctor, because technically they're supposed to serve everyone,
Right.
whether pay or anything. So,
I don't understand the animosity, and I don't understand the reasons for it. If they're doing it from a Christian perspective, I don't understand that. I mean, Jesus was not about barriers. He was more about removing the barriers to get to God. And he was more about welcoming those who were marginalized and threatened versus making them worse. So I just don't get it. I grew up in an evangelical background. I have family that are strongly evangelical, but I just don't understand the perspective.
There seems to be more even emphasis, in a sense, on trans. Never mind just LGBTQ. It seems. Well, I that's a different level right now.
Yeah, the trans folks on the gay side, I feel like one of the things that's happened is that a lot of LGBT folks have gotten rights in a lot of states, protections, marriage, et cetera, et cetera. And we were sort of like to the trans folks, "We'll see you, you know, call it. Yeah. Good luck." And that's the last thing that I want. In fact, we had a whale presentation about the community center, and one of the women who was on the call, it was a Zoom call, said, trans, all you're doing is stuff for trans. I'm like, yes, that's what we want. We want to serve the trans population. You know, in 2004, the right put on TV and put on the ballots all this thing about gay marriage, and it got the vote out, you know, scared people about gay marriage. Well, now it's the trans folks. Trans are the boogeyman, or boogie woman, whatever you want to call it. Trans are the fear, you know, gin up the fear, get that going, and I think trans folks have been in the spotlight for that. And we want to create safe, supportive, and positive environments for the trans community. So we have support groups, parent groups, we do Trans Day Visibility, Trans Day Remembrance. You know, it's between 40 and 50 trans women are murdered in the United States every year. It's insane.
Do you find that the LBG, those that are gay but aren't trans, do you find that some of them aren't, in a sense, helping trans or receptive? Or?
Yeah, I mean,
really? Wow.
We are pushing as hard as we can to.
So you're not kidding when you say people are just like, all right, well.
Well, I think, you know, there's a little bit of we've got ours, you know,
yeah.
Relax. But what our message is from the network is, no, we're all in this together, and we're going to move forward together. So that is, again, a strong message. No matter what individuals are saying or feeling, that our trans brothers and sisters need to be supported, encouraged, protected, and we need to work as hard as we can for them.
And the physical violence is still taking place.
It's huge. It's
nationwide. I mean, I've seen nationwide stats that I got down here, but you were saying, I mean, even in the state, there's still a lot.
Yeah.
Which I don't think people realize. You don't see a press coverage of it.
No, we had a story hour that was broken up by 20 Proud Boys that stomped through the Taunton Library. They weren't getting any traction out on the street. We don't believe in engagement. They're not there to learn, right? They're not there to listen and understand. They're there to cause trouble. So they stormed through the library, down some stairs through the back. I mean, they had to work at it to get into the children's section of the library, where they were as close as I am to you, if not closer, calling our staff whores, pedophiles, and worse. You know, if you and I were skulking around the children's section of the library, we'd be escorted out. And here are the guys with masks and uniforms and weapons, backpacks, things like that, causing all sorts of havoc. Fortunately, our staff is well trained. They're trained in peace, disengagement, and de-escalation. But that was a shock to our community because though there has been LGBT attacks from Proud Boys and Nazis, actually I think it is Nazis, the National Socialist Club or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, they're all kind of nut jobs to me. But there have been 4 instances of violence in Fall River and Taunton. It was shocking that it was so visceral and so intimate.
And book banning is another issue too right now that you're dealing with in some places.
Yes, Marion, Mattapoisett, Rochester have had active struggles against book banning. We've had candidates in Dartmouth running for school committee where they have been concerned about curriculum and books and don't trust the library, and they want to see the books. And of course that to us is code for they want to take our books out of the library. Now, that being said, if you don't want your child to see a book, you can call the librarian and say, I don't want Johnny to read XYZ, and Johnny can't take XYZ out. But also being said, I mean, if you read parts of the Bible, it's quite graphic and pornographic in some respects, and they're not banning the Bible. So it's very selective, shall we say.
Well, we've covered a lot. We got like 15 seconds left. I just want, for folks that want to get in touch with you and the organization, just your little pitch here at the end that I know I try to give you guys.
Absolutely. Reach out to me at Andy at the SouthCoast LGBT Network. We have a website, Facebook page. Feel free. We're all looking for allies. We're looking for LGBT folks. Anyone. We welcome you all.
It's great seeing you again.
It's wonderful. Thank you.
All right. Have a good month. This is lots of things
Happy
going
Pride.
on. Exactly. That's going to do it for this edition of A Conversation With. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon.